Welcome to another episode of the Ishtar channel podcast. I'm Jo Rushton. This is Inasamabu Ishtar. We've got a question that was actually emailed to us to have a discussion about today. And when Ishtar shared that question with me, I had to have a little chuckle inside because I've recently come back from the UK, and one of the conversations that came up between myself and my mum was of a very similar nature. And the question that was posed to us by a student is, how can an all-loving God create the pain and suffering that is so often experienced as we walk through the physical life here on earth? Big question, but it is a question and a debate that's come up so many times. It can create a lot of just the topic itself can create a lot of emotional charge. It can bring up a lot for individuals because of a lack of understanding around the nature of a God that they have been brought into an understanding is unconditional love, and then yet creates experiences here in the physical plane that don't feel loving. So we're going to explore that a little bit more and have a conversation about that.
We are, definitely.
What's the first thing that we have to come into a context of understanding for?
I think, Jo, the issue is that we need to understand what God we're talking about. You know, when we say, oh, how did God, how does he allow all this pain and suffering on the earth? You know, firstly, the first thing that comes to mind is we say, how did he allow all the pain and suffering on the earth? And I think we need to address the fact that we constantly accuse the masculine of creating all this pain and suffering on the earth. And then secondly, really understanding that we're putting all the blame for whatever we're experiencing on the earth into this heavenly figure that we've created, that is the all-seeing, all-being, and creates everything, including every thought and every step and every nuance of our lives. And that's the premise of that belief system, I feel.
And it's a premise that's been developed through the religious ages, through organised religion.
And through organised religion, through temple systems, you know, in Egypt, of the gods there and the gods in Mesopotamia and Greece. And I mean, it goes on. It's not just, you know, Catholicism or Christianity. It's been a belief that's been carried forward time and time again by human beings who really want to create an all-knowing or seeing being that is responsible for everything. And if you just take a breath when I say that while we have a being that is responsible for everything that exists, including everything that happens to us, then what happens to us? Where's our responsibility here?
Where's our power?
We haven't got any. Yeah. So, and that's what we're saying. We have no power. It's all done for us, and it's all created for us. And of course, if you want to believe that, that's perfectly all right. My experience with spirit is that is not true at all. There is no all-seeing God or being that controls everything that's happening to us in the physical world.
So if...
It's gone very violent there. I think we're good. Sorry.
So if we are to explore the idea and the nature of God, to come into a living philosophy, one that is more nurturing and supportive of our experience here, then a little bit like the first episode that we started our podcast with,
God,
who's, who's your God? Because we're talking about a living philosophy, a belief that we're holding in regards to what spirit is.
That's right.
Whether we call it spirit, source, universe, God, Fred, as you always say, the name is not relevant. So how can we, for viewers that do get caught up in the idea that if there was a loving God, we wouldn't be suffering so much.
Yes.
Where can we take them introduce them into an understanding of the nature of source, the nature of creation, and how we interface with that, and therefore...
I think that we need to understand and come to a place of acceptance that source, spirit, whatever you want to call it, is who we are. We're part of that whole energy. God is within us. We are part of God. We are not separate. And we need to understand that we have the power in every moment to create our reality. And we have that power through the choice that we've been given. We make choices all the time. We make choices about the reality that we create in our world and how we respond to that world. And that loving energy, that loving unconditional spirit that's within each one of us, it is always there. It always exists. But are you consciously connecting to it? Are you consciously allowing that beautiful energy of you, of God, to be present here on the earth through you, which is the whole purpose of why you're here, is to allow that to come through and to be here. Because if we really think about this, the suffering and the pain that's caused on this planet is created by human beings. You know? Famine and war. God doesn't create those things. There's not a being outside that said, all you more must go to war. That is not God. Famine. We can feed the whole population of this planet if we wanted to. But we don't. We get farmers to destroy crops because they're overproducing. We get supermarkets to throw out food and we don't share it. So we don't have to have famine. We don't have to have children starving. You know, every year, hundreds of thousands of children are starving on this planet. It's got nothing to do with God. It's about what we're choosing to create. So, and we can go on, the climate issues that we're having right now, completely created by humanity. I know you don't want to accept that. You want to be the victim of some outside source. But the thing is that we're not victims of some outside source. We are the creations of our creators of our reality. And all of those things are things that we are creating through our consumerism, you know, through our selfishness, through our greed, all of those things. I mean, we have drugs, we have medicine that will help to heal many, many people. Do we share it with people? No, we don't. You know, we don't give it away. We charge exorbitant amounts of money so big companies can make a fortune out of it. But that's not God. That's human beings who are completely disconnected to spirit. They don't have a conscious connection to spirit. They don't have a conscious connection to that God that is within them. And it's really important for us to understand that and to remember that we have that ability to connect at any time with that spirit within us if we so choose. And that is the power that we have. And that is the power that has been given to us. And we can use it consciously, or we can choose to remain unconscious and use that power that we have been given to create pain and suffering for ourselves and for others on this planet.
So to come out of the belief system that one holds, that the power of God creates all the suffering, number one, we have to become aware of the belief system.
That's right.
That we're tapped into.
Definitely, yeah.
What thoughts and what feelings those thoughts give birth to through that belief system. And start to recognize that that is actually where our power lies. That's where we're giving our free will to, creating those stories that are creating the separation. That we then believe that we're disempowered by. And then you can fill that sentence in.
But I think the other thing is here is that there's a belief that we are the victims of God. You know, we're going to be judged by God. We discussed all of this in the first podcast about the judgmental God and that wrathful God, you know, and this belief that there is a being. We put those attributes of the human practice onto some entity and say that it's the cause of all of this. But the thing is, it's not. And we become the victims of this wrathful, judgmental God that's causing all the pain and suffering, you know. And I heard somebody say earlier, or we were talking about this a little bit earlier with a group, and I heard someone say, oh, well, you know, the pain and suffering's there so you can have a look and see what energy you're holding within you. And the universe brings it to you. And I'm going to say to you, the universe doesn't bring that to you. If you're holding that sort of energy within you, it's reflected to you because it's not brought to you. It's actually there. You're going to attract it to you all the time because you're holding it to you. So it's not something that's brought to you again to make you suffer so you can see your suffering or your pain or whatever energy that you're holding that's not in balance. It's actually you attracting that to you because you're holding it within you. It's the law of attraction. So, you know, that law of resonance, the same vibration will bring the same vibration. It's like saying, you know, you're trying to solve a problem with the same old thing all over again. You're just going to keep repeating it. It's going to create the same issues over and over again. Stop repeating it. But once again, this whole victim energy, the universe is going to bring me pain and suffering because I need to see it. I need to have pain and suffering so I can see this. The universe is going to bring me pain and suffering because I've been bad and it's judging me. The universe is going to bring me pain and suffering because I need to evolve. The universe is going to bring me pain and suffering, this is a good one, on my spiritual journey because I can't evolve on my spiritual journey without pain and suffering. And that's a really big one. And the truth is, you don't need pain and suffering to evolve. And that's another spiritual furphy that we believe that we must have pain and suffering to evolve.
And as you've just, you know, you've really just described one core belief that filtrates out into a whole spectrum of you know, experiences that we continue to create for ourselves.
And I know a lot of people listening to this will not be happy about what I've just said, you know, because they don't want to take responsibility for what is occurring in their lives, for the energy that is around them. There's no judgment in that. It's simply a fact. And that victim energy, you know, runs very strongly in the programming of humanity. We see ourselves as victims all the time. Firstly of this God, and then of the universe, and then of spirit, and then of each other. We're constantly living our life through this belief in being the victim and not taking responsibility for what we're really creating for ourselves. And each one of us creates our own reality in every single moment. Whatever you're experiencing is something you're creating through your mind. That's your reality. How you perceive your world is created through your beliefs, through the programs you hold. So if you're perceiving your world as being unfair or perceiving yourself as being the victim, if you're perceiving your world as being a very painful place to be in, there's something within your programming that's creating that. And so I would really suggest to you to have a look at that, not to run away from it, not to say, oh, Ishtar doesn't know what she's talking about, not to say, you know, it's definitely this other thing that's causing it, but to really have a look and without judgment and just ask yourself, why am I holding this within me? Why is this in my sphere of consciousness? Because it's not in your sphere of consciousness if you're not wanting to hold it. You know, you're holding it to you, so it's there. If you let it go, it won't be there.
I was just about to ask you, could we leave the audience with three keys to consider where to go next with the conversation that we're offering? Your first key that you've just shared is to really become present and do a bit of an audit.
That's
perhaps.
right. Have an audit of your beliefs. You know, the masters say that we should be auditing our belief systems every 6 to 12 months because 85% of our belief systems are beliefs that we wouldn't choose for ourselves. They're just running in our heads. Randomly in our heads. We've attracted them from our family, from our parents, from our schooling, from humanity, from the mass consciousness. And they just, they're just programs that we run without even consciously thinking about them. So, and if we really sat down and thought about them and asked ourselves, would we choose to run this program for ourselves? Your answer most probably would be 99% no, you
Yep.
wouldn't. So really think about that and release the beliefs and the programs that you're running unconsciously that are not supporting you, that are not bringing to you the harmony in your life, the balance in your life that you really want and that you deserve.
I know that some of you listening may well have in the back of your mind, well, how do I release those beliefs? How do I just let go of that belief that I've had running for so long? And we will, I feel, to do a podcast on perhaps
We can.
how we do
But
that.
I'm going to say something. Let's go for another point here. Second point, when you identify those things, be a bit kind to yourself. Don't judge yourself for holding those beliefs or programs, or don't judge yourself for being unconscious. Choose to exercise kindness to yourself. Because so often, a pain and suffering that we inflict upon ourselves, we actually do it to ourselves. We're hitting ourselves over the head all the time in our judgment of ourselves, you know, in our desire to be perfect all the time, in our desire to be this or to be that. And what I'm going to say to you, start being kinder to yourself. Start being more gentle with yourself. You know, it's a choice. Nobody can make you do that. I can't push a button. Joe can't push a button for that to happen. You actually are being asked, be kinder. Choose to be kinder to yourself. Choose to be more gentle with yourself. Choose to, every time you go into judgment of self, take a breath. Stop. Start to practice non-judgment. Yeah? But observe yourself, but practice non-judgment. Doesn't mean suppressing what you're judging. It means observing what you're looking at, but not judging it. And if you start doing that, you will find that it's much easier to let it go. But the other key I'm going to give you is one of the very basic steps of releasing anything, is you have to acknowledge what it is first. If you don't acknowledge it, you can't release it. You can't release what you're not acknowledging. So you really need to come into an acknowledgement of something before you can let it go. And once again, it's a choice.
And can I ask you to extrapolate a little bit on that? Because I know from having been there at the beginning stages, you know, of my journey, that acknowledgement, it took me a long while to observe myself in actual acknowledgement versus observing myself still judging what I'm supposedly trying to acknowledge, but I'm actually either trying to still justify it or avoid it or change it or, you know, wish it to be different to how it is. And you know, I had to observe myself do all of those things for so long before I go, oh, that's still me not acknowledging whatever it is. And so for me, I can only speak for myself, it was a process of consistent observance.
Yes, it is. It's a practice. You know, when we walk this spiritual path, to walk it consciously means that you have to practice your own spiritual talk. So it's all very good to talk about things, but you need to actually put it into practice. And that means every day practicing acknowledging, practicing letting go of judgment, practicing being kind to yourself, practicing being gentle to yourself. And the more you do that, the more you walk the path. Not just talk your talk, you actually begin to walk the path. Because you can have all these thoughts and ideas in your head and you can talk about them, but unless you're putting them into practice, nothing's going to shift, nothing's going to change within you. And that practice can take you, you know, a week. You might just get it very quickly, which is very, very unusual. Or it could take you a whole lifetime. But once again, if you're being kind to yourself, that's okay. It's when you're not being kind to yourself that you're going, but I want to do it right now. It needs to happen right now. I need to release this right now. I need to change it, which of course you're coming from a place of judgment because you're thinking, oh, well, there's something wrong with me, I've got to fix it. So, and that creates pain and suffering, because pain and suffering can be all sorts of things. It's not just about famine and climate change and war and things like that. It's about how we feel about ourselves. And we create pain and suffering for ourselves every single day through our judgment.
So I hope that what we have shared has shed some light on a greater understanding for how it is that we, part of the collective, are creating whatever it is in our inner worlds that we label as pain and suffering, but to start to look at how it is that we are the curator of that experience. And as Ishtar has shared with us, these prominent first keys, first of all, to do an audit on our belief systems. And if we're holding a belief that's creating pain and suffering, some sort of energy that creates separation within us, then are we willing to observe and acknowledge those beliefs without going into judgment? And that is the hardest thing, not to go into judgment, because we desperately want to change that part of ourself so we don't feel that way anymore. But we can't change what we're not acknowledging. And that first step of acknowledgement is, in all honesty, a state of being.
That's right. Yes.
It's not a state of doing. We don't need to do acknowledgement. It's really coming into a state of being present in the moment with what is, and acknowledging its existence in whatever form it's in, and taking a breath and having a willingness to look and observe and learn from that. And that is a practice. From continuing that in my own life, it is a devotional practice that takes some commitment, a little bit of discipline, but the rewards are
huge reward.
Huge rewards.
It's a gift. It's a gift.
It's a gift of freedom from the pain and suffering.
That's right.
So I hope you've enjoyed our conversation today, and we look forward to being with you again.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.